Welcome to the market recap presented by Tackle Trading. Get in the game.
Good afternoon, Tackle Traders, and hello, YouTube. This is Frank coming to you with the recorded version of the market recap for Thursday, the 27th of June. Still having some problems with our Zoom, so unfortunately won't be able to hang out live with you guys, but I hope you all had a great day both in and out of the market. Certainly a little bit of movement here today from a broad perspective. On the earnings side of things, we do have a Nike reporting here tonight and a Constellation Brands S&P 500 company reporting here tomorrow before the open. Very light beyond that. So a couple of big names. Nike certainly a big name. Beyond that, very, very light on the earnings side of things. Over on the S&P, little gap up on the open. Got a little bit of a running start, pulled back, and traders started moving into that bullish retracement, or at least what was potentially going to be a retracement, working back up, flattened out throughout the second part of the trading day. Maybe we're getting a little bit of a bullish retracement, broadly speaking. You can kind of see here on the S&P how we're kind of starting to put in a little bit of a rounding bottom on this 15-minute chart. So we're starting to see maybe the signs of this pullback being completed. If we sneak into the hourly chart, similar type of a pattern, right? Starting to round out a little bit, breaking above those very short-term hourly moving averages. Still probably need to see a little bit of upward movement for confirmation, and even if we get that, we still have to respect this major level of resistance that is not too far away from us. But of course, the first step is getting to that resistance so we can try to break through it, right? On the support side of things, resistance side of things, nothing really has changed. We can now maybe look to yesterday's low as a little bit of a short-term support level, simply because of the moderate upward movement we saw here today. But I believe we're still looking at our swing from back in early or mid-June, that previous swing low, as the support zone on the S&P. And of course, on the resistance level, that one's staring at us in the face still, right? We figured this was going to be a battle. It's still up in the air, right? We will see where this one goes going into the G20. That's certainly something on the market's mind. Whether it should be or not, we'll see, but it feels like that is the case. Over on the Dow Jones, very similar type of pattern, but as you can kind of see, a little bit of a doji candlestick right on that 9 EMA. Always an interesting development. Same issue we're going to have, though. We need some upward movement for any sort of confirmation in my mind, and then we're still going to have to deal with this this major level of resistance. So as we're getting into the end of the week, really I don't think we're going to have a ton of clarity one way or the other. But we still have very clear levels of resistance, so we know where some really strong potential bullish signals are going to occur. And that, of course, is the ultimate break, if that is, in fact, what we are able to do. Over in the NASDAQ, very, very similar type of action, a little bit of upward movement, but mostly a doji, not a lot. We kind of had that opening run and then really simmered down, slowed down throughout the rest of the trading day. Interestingly, though, we actually saw our semiconductor ETF break out. You know, it pushed through on the intraday that resistance level yesterday, breaking out here today. I think this looks better than most of the individual charts in this industry personally, but that's kind of an eye of the beholder thing. More than, you know, a new trade necessarily, I think that is a positive sign for tech as a whole and potentially the NASDAQ as well. So I thought that was definitely worth noting here today. On the NASDAQ side of things, again, we can kind of start to look to these swing lows, the low points maybe was a better way to call them. I don't think we've seen enough upward movement to call them swing lows just yet, but these lows that we've set up this week as a little bit of short-term support. We're going to need a little bit more upward movement, though, before I'm comfortable saying, yeah, we can bet on that being the level that we can really focus on and identify. Still at just north of 78 going to be our resistance level here on the NASDAQ, with, at least for me right now, currently support still around that 74.40 marker on the NASDAQ. The right had a good day. Certainly the biggest winner index-wise by a long shot here today. Really got cooking here today. That is a very impressive candle top to bottom, unlike the rest of the market that held its own, not trying to knock it. We certainly saw a lot more oomph on the rut here today than any of our other indexes. Certainly a little bit of a bullish signal. If we can continue this, I will expect that we're going to try to take another run at our recent swing high if we can follow through off of this candlestick. Still, overall, I'm looking at the rut as neutral. I'm loving it just going back and forth. I think probably many, if not all of you guys are as well. Being our iron condor index, we don't mind a little back and forth. I think I can speak for all of us when I say that. Get a little more interesting in the sectors, but not quite as much difference between the sectors today as there was yesterday. Over in materials, we're still just knocking on that door. We refuse to give up, but that is just a tough break for us right now at that $58 range. We've looked at ECL all week, so why not revisit them here today? Yesterday, of course, we kind of saw it kind of give up at resistance, quite a bit of selling, working right back into that today. I like the way that it went, and as of yesterday, I felt like we needed to be open to an entry if it broke above it, but I didn't feel comfortable with having an entry in if we broke that resistance. I think we can kind of come back to where we were earlier in the week for a potential signal if this is something that we're interested in from a bullish perspective. Very clear top, worked into it pretty quickly, flatlined the second part of the trading day. I would have liked it a little bit better had yesterday not happened, and more importantly, had we not broke support, albeit briefly, but I will call that a little bit of a bullish signal. There are certainly going to be candidates out there for us in the material sector. It may or may not be ECL. That's up for us to individually decide, but there are certainly going to be candidates. We've talked about it, it seems like forever now, but we've been talking about it for a few weeks. If we can ever push through this resistance zone on the ETF, we do have some room to run. I think it's very encouraging personally that we've not dropped down, right? We've not went up, but we have not really gone down overall within this sector. So still going to be watching for that break, hopefully next week now. I mean, it might break tomorrow, but I would prefer that it waited till Monday if it's going to break. Over in the energy sector, we did see some selling. Worst performing sector here today was the energy sector. We're still in that little pinch, right? We've got a pretty clear level of resistance above us. We've got this little upward trend that we've developed. We're kind of hanging out right between the 50 and the 9 EMA moving average. We just are in the middle of, we're waiting, right? Break above, I'm going to interpret as a bullish signal. Break below, I'm going to interpret as a bearish signal. We're still stuck in the middle, at least as of right now. So this is going to be one going into, hopefully next week, maybe we have some breakout candidates or some breakdown retracement type of candidates. With the way it's developed through this week, we probably need one more day of being in this range for that. If we break one way or the other, I think we'll probably, at least I'll have a bias to that side going into next week on the in energy overall. If we can push through that, really not a lot until we work into that 200-day moving average in my mind. So a little bit of upward room, in my opinion, if energy can break resistance. If we can break to the downside, we're gonna have a lot of little things. We're gonna have our low from the week. We're gonna have that 20-period moving average. There are going to be little potential support catalysts, but I don't believe they're particularly strong catalysts if we give out on this little upward trend line that we have developed. Over in the financials, we did see some upward movement off of that support level. Definitely nice to see many of our insurance companies kind of coming back after a lot of selling yesterday, right? Probably my favorite of the bunch is L, but there's plenty that look very similar to L here, kind of sitting right between that 9 and that 20. You've got Allstate. In a little bit of a deeper pullback. I know a lot of people like deeper pullbacks, and you guys know I don't like deeper pullbacks. So there's going to be something for just about everybody from a pullback perspective within this industry if they are interested in it. At the very least, we need to see some follow through tomorrow. For the most part, most of these insurance companies did rally here today. We need to see some continuation before I get too terribly excited about them. But our banks also, again, they haven't been terrible, but they've not been Great, right? We've talked a lot about that, but we really did see some decent movement in some of the banks here today. Bank of America up over 2%, Wells Fargo up over 1%, kind of holding its own. Citigroup over 2%, showing a little bit, break some resistance. That's a decent looking signal. Maybe I don't want to trade it, but it would make me feel better if the banks were showing some strength. So we did see a little bit of strength in the banks here as well, which is certainly an encouraging sign. I think at this point in time, we can really look to this low that we've been dancing on this week and set up last week as our support zone. If this gives out, I think that needs to be interpreted as a little bit of a bearish signal. As long as it holds, we're somewhere between bullish and slightly bullish slash neutral. Now, bullish with a side of neutrality or whatever, however you want to call it. On the resistance side of things, really probably just looking at this 2760 as that next real level of resistance for us. We do, of course, have a lot of history, as you all know, in that 2635 range. But we've really kind of established, in my mind, a new sideways range where, yeah, that's something from days gone by. But really the range that we're in right now hasn't been paying any attention to it whatsoever. So on resistance, about 2760 over in the financials. Over in the industrials, we saw a nice little doji, double doji, little doji party going on here today. Still think we need some upward movement, but I like the way that this is shaping up potentially for some retracements going into tomorrow or ideally next week at this point in time. Boeing kind of threw a little bit of cold water on things, a little bit more bad news on Boeing. This is why I've been so shy about Boeing on either side, bearish or bullish. The news can just come out of left field, it seems, and it came out a little bit out of left field here today after really trying to break out after that nice original break. Just right back to the old breakout point. I have no interest whatsoever in Boeing personally, as everybody here knows, but they really kind of pushed a little bit of pressure on this sector here today. I think we need a little more upward movement. If we can get that, that might start to give us some opportunities if we're looking for bullish opportunities, at least within this sector. Don't really have any real reason if we can capture some upward momentum, get moving back in the bullish direction. No real reason that we're not working back to that recent high that we set up here on that original gap. So really interesting going into tomorrow or early next week. Certainly an area I think worth keeping our eyes on. Over in technology, kind of a do-nothing day. We had quite a bit of movement, and there goes my mouse and my book. So quite a bit of movement in some of the semiconductors to the upside, but we didn't really see, as much strength as we would like to see. Very bland type of a day for Microsoft. Apple tried on the intraday to break that resistance, failed here today. If we can break through that resistance slash today's high, that might be a signal for the bulls. So it was really kind of a very dull day. You did see Intel sell a little bit, Cisco taking a little bit of profits too as it continues to battle at that resistance level. I still think that Oracle is one of the most interesting bullish watch list candidates for a potential breakout within the tech sector. Personally, if you go into a shorter time frame, after our gap up on that earnings report, we have established a very clear top, and we haven't been able to break through it yet, right? We may never break through it, but I certainly am going to be keeping an eye on that one. Personally, I really like that as a breakout candidate myself. Broadly speaking, not a lot to see here, but I do think it is a positive that we saw some more upward movement in the semiconductors, a little bit of a breakout on the Semiconductor Etf. That's starting to show at least a little bit more strength, which certainly can't hurt the overall strength of the technology sector. Really, at the very least, we need some upward movement. We probably need to take out yesterday's high, which is going to line up pretty darn close with today's high to get any sort of momentum going. Of course, we've got resistance not too terribly far ahead of us at that swing high. Of course, that is the all-time high on the ETF. Over in staples, nice little hammer candle forming at that $58 marker. I really like what we're seeing here on the staples sector, slowing down. We had a lot of selling yesterday, pretty violent. I definitely wanted to see at least a day of catching our footing again, we need to see some upward movement at least for one day, and I would argue two personally. But a good solid development. Some interesting candidates out there too. You know, Walmart sitting right on its 9 EMA on this big old doji, right? Really dipped down to rally back above it. So captured quite a bit of momentum off of that low point, as you can kind of see, selling early, really rallying strong, forming that doji candlestick. I believe it was, I can't remember, there was another one in there. Oh, it was Mondelez, that was who it was. Similar type of a pattern on Mondelez, I believe, if I'm not thinking about the wrong stock. No, it was the wrong stock. All right, well, when in doubt, just go to your list, right? So it was Costco. It was Costco. There we go. Little bit of a pullback into that 9 EMA coming off of the lows. You know, and all of these things, any pullback, in my opinion, we always have to get that upward movement as confirmation, whether we're looking at the ETF, the market as a whole, an individual stock, whatever it might be. But starting to feel like, you know, maybe there's going to be some pullback opportunities with all of that selling more than anything. And it's not so much for tomorrow. I am glad to see that we saw some stability come back in. We're seeing some buyers coming in after yesterday's fire sale in not just the staples, but in utilities and the REITs as well. They're not huge days necessarily, but some sort of stabilizing force for at least today. Got to watch to see if we can get some upward movement. I'll feel better when we get back above that 20-day moving average personally. I don't like to be below the 20. Over in utilities, working back into that some support zone. Again, slowed down here today. Not a great looking candle, but certainly much better than yesterday's, right? Kind of working into that zone around that 50-day moving average. Upward movement is the name of the game here today, right? In these areas, we saw so much selling yesterday. Catching our footing here today, let's see if we can get some upward movement. There certainly are going to be some candidates. I think the coaches in the halftime report brought up Southern. I thought that was a really interesting candidate that they brought up within this sector, kind of sitting right on that 20. We'll see if we can get some upward movement. We've been strong overall in utilities, and yesterday is not going to change my overall opinion, but it does throw on the caution flag for that next bullish opportunity. Off of support, some upward movement, we can certainly start talking. This 59 is worth keeping an eye on. This should be a pretty strong zone between the old history here, the 50-day moving average, certainly where my eyes are going to be drawn to as long as we're hanging around down near it. Little bit of a bounce back day over in healthcare. Not a lot, but a little green inside candle here as buyers started to move back into this space as well. I'm going to have to go to my other list here. And let's see, I threw them up on the Tackle Trading Twitter, but this is a little biotech company. I don't exactly know what they do, and they are biotech, so we have to kind of keep that in mind. They can be a little bit crazy, but you can kind of see a little bit of a cup, little bit of a handle. We had a pretty decent spike of volume into that resistance here. I'm going to take a closer look at what these guys do this evening. That's an interesting pattern in my mind if you're comfortable with biotech, and not everybody's going to be. Of course, Humana, we talked yesterday. We saw some upward movement here today. Selling off of the highs, not the greatest thing, which almost puts us into we need to break. We need to break above that resistance, which I think is more than fair for any traders who moved in early today off of the little short pullback. I think that was a reasonable entry too, and good job. I wish I were there with you. But for those of us who didn't, risk to reward is going to be tough. We have to respect this resistance. This is going to go on my breakout list, though, going into next week for sure. We have the other side of things like our align. Well, we didn't see a lot of downward movement. Our pattern is still very much intact, running into that falling 200-day moving average, getting pushed down. Haven't broke the support zone that established yesterday. Some downward movement, that might be something on that bearish side of things. Of course, you also have our friends over at Lilly that are kind of hanging right at that support zone. So this is going to be a fight that is worth monitoring. You know, right now the bears are in control. This is a support zone. We did see some decent movement off of it not too terribly long ago. It so far is holding. If that breaks, that should give us an opportunity to see a little bit more movement to the downside. So while I still do lean personally to the bull side on healthcare, I am still very open to any good looking bearish setups within that space. On the ETF itself, again, we got to get a little more upward movement, right? We've got to reestablish that momentum. Today is definitely a good start, but it's just the start. We need to see some follow through, at least in my mind, we need that follow through. We were able to get that follow through here today in discretionary, right? We had a very similar doji type development yesterday, saw some upward movement here today. Again, going into tomorrow, it's important that we continue that momentum. Of course, in this space, there is probably my favorite trade setup overall. Where are you? You would think I'd recognize they go alphabetically. I look at them every day a dozen times, and that's our friends over at Mickey D's. They are knocking on that door, pushing right into the top of that resistance level. It's tough to break, right? It's been trying for several weeks now. Certainly a breakout candidate worth monitoring. Of course, Nike with earnings here tonight, worth taking a look at here tomorrow. You did see GM and Ford catch a couple of upgrades here today. GM's chart's not all that fantastic, I don't personally believe, but Ford really pushed through, now kind of working back into resistance, probably going back into my breakout list above 1050. We had this in the reports a couple, I guess a month and a half or so ago, back through here on a break above like 1055 or something along those lines, probably where I'm going to put it back. But I think you could argue if we break this resistance, there's a fairly clear path into the 1050 range as well. Seeing some good solid strength overall within the discretionary sector right now. A lot of the candidates out there catching my eye, at least, can't trade them all, but seeing some strength. On support side of things, we've seen some upward movement. We know the history, so with this 117.50 zone, certainly worth keeping our eyes open. And of course, we got that big overhead resistance, all-time high, just shy of 121 on the top end. So something worth keeping an eye on, but certainly some nice movement there today. A little bit of stabilizing here in XLRE, not enough to get me terribly excited for tomorrow, but I am excited about some opportunities in the REITs if we can kind of simmer down. Probably the best looking one, if I were searching for a REIT tomorrow that I found, at least the one that I thought was the best looking, was VTR here. I'm not exactly sure what exactly they do, but I found them in a scan. Nice little candle here showing a little bit of upward movement, a little more of a qualified pullback than some of the bigger names within this space, at least in my mind. Although there's certainly some interesting candidates, they just need to, again, we need to catch a floor. We need to see some upward movement. It was a pretty violent sell-off, and not just yesterday. Unlike the staples, it was kind of just yesterday. Utilities kind of just yesterday. We've seen a lot of selling for several trading sessions leading into today on the REIT. So want to get some stabilizing there, but we're going to have pullback opportunities. CCI, another really interesting one from a pricing perspective. They're testing their old resistance zone here, as you can see, as support. That also happily coincides with that 9-weekly EMA. Let's see where we go. Probably for me, going to need to get into next week, see some upward movement tomorrow, or kind of a little bit of a back and forth dance, followed by some upward movement sometime next week before I get too excited. But we are getting that pullback opportunity. I don't feel, at least collectively, it's there to pounce on tomorrow morning. But I do think that if we've been interested in REITs, we got our pullback, right? It's we may not choose to trade any of them, but I do think we should go around, see if there's anything that is interesting to us. And lastly, over in the communication services, not a whole lot, much of a back and forth type of a day after the original gap on the open, really didn't go anywhere. Of note, we've got, of course, Google showing a little more downward movement, still pretty darn bearish chart for Google right now, in my mind at least. Facebook still in no man's land, kind of between support and resistance. You did have EA work right into that resistance level here again, coming off of the intraday high. If we break above that high, I think you could argue that is a breakout. Now, I've thought about it, and I just can't do it. So if that does break out on either side, bullish or bearish, right now we're on the bullish side of things. 2 weeks from now, we might be having the exact conversation on the support side. I can't do it. I don't like to trade EA personally, but I can see that pattern. If we can push through that would be, I would call it a breakout, just one that I would pass on. So not a lot going on over here. Of course, in my mind, the most interesting one, which is of course Disney, still just waiting. Still just waiting to see. And if you haven't had a chance to get over to the Tackle Trading Instagram page, definitely do so. Coach Noah's got a nice little video over there for you on Disney for all of our Instagram users. So I enjoyed watching that. I'm sure you will as well if you haven't had a chance to do so. Over on the VIX side of things, not a lot to see here. Again, we're kind of just hanging out, it seems like, for the most part, waiting for that G20, and then we'll see where that one takes us. Little bit of a rally on the dollar, but as you can kind of see, coming well off of the intraday highs, looking like potentially a little bit of a bearish retracement. Not quite there yet in my mind, although you could argue that any downward movement below today's low would be an aggressive entry point for a bearish trade. I want to see it push a little bit further into that 200 moving average and then get some signals. If I'm interested in playing this from a swing perspective, this is an important level, and I'm calling it the 200 day moving average. As long as we're below that, I think it's very hard to have a bullish stance on the dollar. I expect that to be a challenge, and ultimately a tough challenge to win. And so I do expect that there's a good chance that we're seeing some selling in the dollar in the days to come at that resistance, or as we approach that resistance level. Over in gold, a pretty interesting day. I have to zoom way the heck in here because I have a couple lines here. Little bit of a turnaround candle, right? Little bit of upward movement here today. Let's go into the intraday here on gold. You can kind of see, and I'll zoom all the way back out, putting together a little bit of a break here into that hourly 50-day moving average. If I'm thinking about an entry into gold, it's probably going to be above that swing high, and I'm not really, I think we can be a little more greedy, but at the same time, I'm not going to be shocked if I don't eat those words tomorrow. If we start seeing some upward movement as strong as it has been, I wouldn't bet against gold in any way, shape, or form. But a little bit of a doji type of a candle here today. Again, if we're thinking about doing anything, we've got to get some upward movement. That is not a very deep retracement. I think we should be greedy and ask for a little bit more, but that is just me. You, of course, may or may not agree. Over in silver, breaching down on the intraday out of this little zone, that does kind of concern me here. We did kind of recapture it and close back above that 9. If we close below that 9 weekly, I'm going to expect a little bit more selling. If we come out of this breaking down, breaking below that 9, maybe you should expect a little bit more selling in the short term. Still don't think it's a great trading environment from the bearish side of things. Still believe that the break to the upside ultimately is the most interesting. If you're of the school of thought to bet on this little support zone that they built over the last week and a half holding, gotta love where they are. You see some upward movement, well, hey, we have been sideways, right, for this last little while. So pretty clear levels, in my mind, around that 1520 range at the support, and of course the 1560 at resistance. A little bit of a bounce back day in natural gas here today, working right into that 20-day moving average, still holding that same floor that we've been looking at for the last couple of days. Very interesting development, I personally believe. I believe we do need to take that out if we're looking at it from a bearish perspective, but now we're running into that daily 20. We've got this very clear floor. A more aggressive trader than me might say we can get in here, but that is not who I am. But now that we're fighting with this 20-day moving average, if we give out that floor, I'm definitely calling that a tradable signal to the downside. To the upside, you guys know where I am. Basically, as long as we're below the 50, which is lining up pretty darn close to that breakdown point, it's bear or just wave at your friends as they trade natural gas. I would not want to try to call this bottom. And lastly, over in crude, not a whole lot to see here, but still putting up the good fight just shy of that $60 range. So still taking a little bit of time, holding up strong, but not having the oomph. It's been a heck of a run, right? We know that there's a lot of stuff in this range, whether it's weekly or daily moving averages, previous history between 60 and 60.50. This is just going to be a little bit of a battle. So far, it's holding up well. There's no doubt about it. I don't think there's any new great signal here today, though. Personally, maybe a pullback would be okay. Maybe this rising 9 catching back up with us and pushing us through might be something to keep an eye on if we are going to consolidate in this area for too terribly long. we'll see where this one takes us. But right now, pretty much the exact same as it was here yesterday. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to do it for the market recap for today. But apologize for not being live with you. Always miss, I definitely miss talking to you guys. It's certainly more fun. I say it, and this is a good reminder. It is a lot more fun to do this with you guys live than to do it on my own. But I hope you are all doing well. Hope you had a great day trading. Of course, if you are new around here, we always invite you to join us, sign up, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. Join us over on Twitter at Tackle Trading. You can, of course, find me at FrankMartin23. Be sure to check out the Tackle Instagram. Some really cool stuff going on over there as well. For our pro members tonight, it is Thursday, which means one thing around here, and that is Cash Flow Club going on here tonight. So you guys are going to have a good time in there, I have no doubt. And of course, if you're not a pro member, you're always invited. Get over to tackletrading.com. We can get you hooked up with the 15-day free trial. Tell them I sent you. Maybe we can get you a couple extra days tacked on there as well. Come see what it's all about. We certainly love to have you over on our team. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, get out of here. Have a fantastic Thursday afternoon. Hopefully, I will see you live and in person here on Friday. We'll take a sneak peek of some of the candidates I have for the stock report as we wind this one down. Have a great night, everybody, and I will see you tomorrow.